guys. Hey Kel, thanks for joining us. Today we have a very special guest, super busy person, Marvin Liao. He's a partner of 500 startups. 500 startup? 500.
500 startups. 500 startups.
500 startups. And what he does now is he manages a portfolio of softwares and startups that he's actively engaged in. So I feel like it's very cool to bring him into this group so that we know what's really on the other side of the coin, because a lot of you guys are taught by me about the simple software world where you don't get a bunch of funding. You go and you have a Chrome extension created, and then here is Marvin, who is like neck deep in the whole world of startup funding and portfolio building. So he is the corporate side of things, and I want to bring him into this group to see what that side is about, how subscribers, how companies scale according to what he sees. And from his perspective, I see it as like a 10,000-foot view down on all these companies that are being funded. And I think that's a really exciting conversation to have with him. So welcome, Marvin.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for making it. And I want my group to get to know who you are. So tell us what or who got you on this journey, becoming a partner at 500 startups and getting into the whole software world.
Sure. I would say in general, I've been very lucky. So I kind of joke that I'm kind of the Forrest Gump of Silicon Valley. I mean, literally the Forrest Gump of Silicon Valley. So I moved to San Francisco back in '99. So I've been here about 20 years now. And so my first couple roles were really sort of in the startup world, in marketing, online marketing. So the first startup I worked at, I was a very early employee, ran marketing for them. And I joined as employee number 18, and we went to about 150 people after raising $30 million. And then of course, the dot-com bubble imploded in 2001. So the company pretty much imploded. And then I joined Yahoo back in 2001. Was there for about 10 and a half years. So I was really always more on the sales marketing. I ran a bunch of business groups over there, particularly overseas. And so I spent a lot of time, sort of both buying, selling ads, and, also helping a lot of the corporate. I was a corporate officer over there. So I helped work on a lot of corp dev deals. So just was a business person over there. Then I left Yahoo in end of 2011, beginning of 2012, and I actually took 2 years off and did sort of angel investing and joined a bunch of boards, observatory boards, and mentored a lot of startup accelerators, and that kind of led me to 500. So accidentally, one of the sort of programs I worked at or said mentored at was 500. And when they opened up the San Francisco office about 6 years ago, they asked me to join. So I've been running the San Francisco office, for the last 6 years, and running sort of investing for their fund and running the core accelerator program. So I've been doing this now for 6 years, have made over 414 investments, majority obviously software, 90% software, and a lot of it in both on the consumer and B2B side. But I have to say I tend to do more on the B2B side is probably where it seems like I can add the most value, where my portfolios perform the best.
Oh, B2B side. You spoke so fast. So I want to go back to you. So you joined a startup. It got funded 30 million, and then the bubble burst, and then it crashed.
Yeah.
And then it was by happenstance that, and then you were in the corporate world with Yahoo for a decade, running corporate, their corporate division. And then you went and part of Connection that was part of a program that you're in or you're with.
So the best way to explain it, just I literally took 2 years off, and one of the things just to I had the benefit of being able to sort of financially be able to sort of take 2 years off, but one of the things I did was just to keep your brain active. Besides the boards and the angel investing, I was also very fortunate to I just mentored a lot of startup accelerators as a volunteer, and one of them happened to be 500 startups. And so that's how I got, so that's kind of how so I got to know the team very, very well over here. So I worked with them, I mean, as a volunteer, right? I spent like a year and a half here, just like volunteering and mentoring at 500 startups, and for the startups, meeting a lot of startup founders and mentoring them.
Because they can't afford you.
Well, it's just like I wasn't there to sort of make any money, right? It was just there because there's a great way. You know, originally, like one of the managing partners was a good friend, and he was like, "You're not doing anything. Just come help out here." And he was right. I'm just like, I'm not doing anything. And so originally did it as a favor for him. And then it turned out to be like, hey, I'm actually learning a lot of stuff. And, you know, especially when you've been in the corporate world and, you know, high growth corporate like Yahoo. So when I joined, it was like less than 3,000 people. You know, when I left, it was about like 15,000 people, right? Like watching a company grow like crazy like that. And by the way, it was 15,000 people after we had fired about like 4,000 people, right? Like, you know, they had ups and downs.
Yeah.
You know, watching the crazy growth of a company was like an amazing experience. And that's still like, I've been super lucky, right? I think at my startup at Alibris, at Yahoo, even here at 500, just like the amazing people I've got to work with, amazing people I've met. You know, just got lucky. I have to say I'm incredibly grateful of sort of just, I think, you know, the reality is people ask me for a lot of career advice, and I'm like, I don't think I'm the best person to give career advice, because I think a lot of it, if I'm very, very, you know, honest, it's just like luck, right? I happen to be in the right place at the right time. I worked hard when I got to these places, but like there's an element of just like, I didn't do any career planning. Like there's no strategic planning at all. And I'm just like, I don't know. I just kind of like, it just sort of worked out. And I don't know if I stayed in Canada, I don't think my career would have worked out this way, right? Because I think a lot of times when you think about career, think about your business, right? If you think about whether you're starting a business, whether you're starting your career, sometimes you kind of just have to go to the center of the network, right? Like where all the activity is, right? And honestly, like I just kind of ended up in San Francisco when we saw sort of like this explosion of tech, right? Because tech was not a sexy area. Maybe it was sexy for like, from like maybe 96 to 99, it was not a sexy area from like 2000 to, I'm going to say even like 2013, 2014, really, right? Like that was not the obvious choice, right? Like that was not the thing that a young person coming out of school would go and say, I'm going to do a tech startup, or right, or somebody coming out of business school going and saying like, I'm going to go join like Google or join like it is now. But I don't think like even in 2012, like your default was like, I'm going to go join a management consulting firm or join a hedge fund or join an investment bank or Goldman Sachs, right? Like that was a path. And that really, tech only really became sexy maybe like 5 years ago, I'm going to say, right? Like maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's huge element of luck and timing.
Yeah. Speaking of luck and time, hold on. Let me say hi to everyone who joined. Hey, Yogesh. Hey, Gabriel. Hey, Mike. Hey, James. Hey, Owen. Hey, Vicky. I will remember to remind you later. Hey, Eric. Hey, Marina. Hey, Cal. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. So the question I want to ask, I know it looks like a lot of it is luck and you're in the right place and right time. Speaking of luck, though, for what you see, I feel like the trends that you see now, is it for startups to succeed because you help with so many accelerators? What advice so it's not career advice, I'm gonna ask you about
sure.
What advice do you have in terms of what are the winning factors that makes a startup scale, be able to scale faster with their subscribers? Is it like the owner's hard work and grind, or you know, in my world, in the simple software world, there's a lot of things that we just try out. Try if this works, we try if that works, but we really don't have the perspective you do. So if you can shed light on what you see works in terms of scaling like a software company.
So here's the thing that I actually think, like for a lot of startups in general, so there's a couple of things. Obviously you look at sort of like the founders, like do they, you know, can they grind out, you know, do they have the staying power to grind, to sort of like grind long enough until they find something that actually works? And so a lot of it is like a lot of experimentation. I think a big part is actually like the best founders and the companies that actually do the best are ones that, it's about really understanding the stage that you're in and actually over-indexing on like spending time with customers and talking to customers, right? And it's like talking to customers is not scalable, right? Like that is not a scalable thing. But I do think that when it's a big part in actually understanding customers and understanding your customer segmentation and actually understanding the customer's problems. And I think too many times founders over-index on the building of the product and they under-index actually on talking to customers. And in some ways also, I think like the best startup founders in the beginning, you actually almost have to over-service customers, right? Because that actually drives a lot of word of mouth. And so a lot of times it's just like, I'm quoting sort of my sort of cooperators over at like, Y Combinator, like one of the co-founders over there said, it's about in the beginning, it's actually about doing unscalable things. Right? Because I think too many people care too much about like scaling. They're going like, I want to use these CRM systems or this like new email system. I'm like, you don't even know who your customers are. You don't even know sort of the messaging, like just like all these things. Like, why are you talking about this other stuff that makes no sense, right? Like it's like add a zero, right? Like why are you talking about getting 1 million customers when you haven't gotten one customer yet, right? So it's about being very systematic. So, the best piece of advice I give folks is like, like think about scaling from a systematic way. So, before, if you have like no customers, your first focus is on getting the first one, right? Or first subscriber. And then your next focus is getting like add a zero, get 10. And then it's about getting 100. Then it's about getting 1,000. And I think I'm just, most founders I talk with who are not great founders are just like, you have no customers and you're talking about how you scale to 1 million. Like, that's just like ludicrous to me.
Is that how you talk to them? Like,
I'm very direct, right? So I'm not very Californian at all. So I'm actually surprised I've lasted this long here in the SFA area in California. But just like at the end of the day, I think like true founder friendliness is actually being honest, like not being a total dick, but at the same time, it's just like being direct and not wasting their time.
Oh yeah. Like I come from like the way that I teach my people is from that kind of perspective where don't worry about what all these other, like even customer service chatbots, like don't worry about getting like the best of the best if there's no customer yet. Like make sure that you're smashing credit cards to some extent before you go out and think about like all the other little things. But so the stage that I'm at is that we have subscribers and it's doing around like 15,000 monthly for one of the Chrome extensions, and I'm looking to grow it. I do have other Chrome extensions. They're not doing as well as that one. And that's, I mean, to be transparent, that's where I'm at. So I'm not at the level where it's like a couple million a month or anything like that.
Sure.
So for someone at my level, what are actions that I can take in order to, because I feel like to grow, to really know what's out there, it's a lot about talking to the customers, but also talking to people that have been in the industry and kind of asking them like, what's your take, even if it's brutal, in terms of advice.
Yeah.
But like, where can someone like me and the people that I teach go to in order to figure out what's on the other, what's real, what will actually help us get more subscribers?
So I have a bunch of thoughts on that, right? Like I tend, if I had to sort of index my time, I'm like, I still think it's like 90% like going and dissecting your your subscriptions and trying to get as much both quantitative data as well as qualitative data, right? Like and it's a lot of everything for me. Like you'll hear a lot, like if you talk to any of my startup founders or any founder that I work with or talk with, like I talk a lot about customer segmentation. And so a lot of times it's about figuring out, like in some ways, just to simplify it, customer segmentation is really simplifying so your sort of like your audience really in 3 segments, right? Like it's the audience who are like the super heavy users who like love what you do, and they're going to end up driving sort of like most of your revenue and in theory drive most of your usage, right? And so that's usually 10%. And then there's sort of like the audience that just like comes in and just bounces, right? And so the people who will like never ever use your service, it's actually important to understand who these folks are. And it's kind of like the middle, right? Like the 50 to 80% in the middle, where just like you just don't necessarily like, I think that it's like they come and they use it, but they're sort of like mild users. They're not like the hardcore users. And what is really, really helpful is just like trying to see if there's any distinct differences between any of these three demographics and trying to understand sort of like, are they different from a sociographic, demographic perspective? Or if they're like all the same, like, is it because of the way that they found your sort of, in this case, like, found your product? And so just like, there's a lot of like, I actually think of the best founders in many ways are like private investigators. Like you're trying to hunt for the truth, right? You're trying to figure out like, what makes these folks different? And so sometimes it's actually much easier where it's like, wow, it's very, very clear. Like these are all very different types of people. Like then just go and like double down on finding more of the people, like the people who really, really love what you're doing, right? And then that helps drive a lot of your understanding of like, okay, I should go and focus on these channels, right? So let's just say hypothetically, the people who tend to be heavy users in this situation are like, I'm making it up, right? Like males 18 to 20 from the rural South. And you're like, okay, great. Like if that is actually my audience that has a high propensity to go and like subscribe and use and is going to like, I'm solving their problem. Like what are the media channels, like online, offline media channels that I actually be leveraging to sort of like get in front of them, right? Or blogs or services that I can actually do stuff to sort of like work with them to get in front of this audience, or podcasts, like whatever it is, right? Like maybe it's Joe Rogan or something like that. Like whatever it is. That's easier in my opinion, or not say easier, simpler. I think actually where the challenge is when you look at these, if you go in like just to simplify these like segments and you're like, wait a minute, they all kind of look alike, like, just from a demographics and sociographic. So like you have to go and dig down a little bit more of just like, so this is actually where the customer interviews and the conversations where you're actually calling them and trying to figure out like, okay, they all look alike. So why are these folks more likely and have a higher propensity like use this and these folks don't? And so it's a lot of investigation work, and that takes a lot of time, right? Like this is not something you have like 5 conversations you figure it out. You're probably having like 50 to 150, 200 conversations at least to really go and figure this out. And that takes time. And a lot of people don't want to do that work.
But that's what it takes.
Yeah, that's what it takes. Like it just takes a long time.
Wow, I thought you were gonna say between the heavy users and the other, the mild users and the people who never use but hear about you, what to bridge that gap in the difference in them to see if these people will move to over there. But then you're like, no, like take that 10% and really like go deep on that and double down on that.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, I think about why the internet didn't work. Like a lot of these internet businesses didn't really work in like 99, 2000. There may be 250 people online. There's over 2 billion people online. And so the reality is that you're going to find like, once you've figured out your customer segment, like there's actually niches are big, right? Like niches are significantly bigger now. You could build a huge business just focusing on a niche. And so I think it's a very, I'm of the view just like, why to convert? Why should you even focus your energy on converting people that are just unconvertible?
True. Yeah. And especially with the Chrome extension stuff, it's like super, super niche to like one thing. A Chrome extension can solve like one zap, or it replaces like, Zapier, one copy paste.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really good. I love hearing advice like this. So for you, how do you suggest we should consume data now in terms of like teaching, like learning? You mentioned talking to customers is not super, it's time consuming and not scalable, but it's what's necessary. And then going deep on the people who are like your diehards, where they hang out, what media channels they're using, and getting in front of them. In terms of like looking for who to learn from, or what to learn from, or what to consume, what do you suggest for us to do?
So for example, I am a huge fan of conferences, not all conferences, but like, for example, like I'm a big fan of like SaaStr. I'm a big fan of SaaStock. I think MicroConf is excellent too. I mean, I think for your audience, probably MicroConf is more relevant. But like I like a lot of these sort of like these type of conferences where there's a aggregation of a lot of like, very successful sort of like startup entrepreneurs, like software entrepreneurs, but also a lot of newbies. And you can learn a lot from like people at different stages and having that sort of finding your community, right? Or doing things like Dan Martell's Masterminds. Like I'm a big fan of Masterminds. I haven't joined a lot of them, but I've kind of built my own mastermind. So for example, when I joined VC like 6 years ago, like I had to go kind of build my own mastermind of just like who are VCs that are really that either I'm friendly with already or people that I respect, like get to sort of like spend time with regularly or irregularly. There's a lot of podcasts out there right now. So for example, like I'm a huge fan, and both of them are good friends of mine. Like Hit and Shaw, as well as Stelly FT. Like there's like lots of great, like Patrick, sort of Patrick from Profitwell. Like they're just like Nathan Lotka, who's also a good friend. Like they all have like really helpful like podcasts, right? Like and they all have very different styles, and you can learn new things from them. Dan, of course. Like there's a lot of great information out there just from podcasts alone.
A lot of what you mentioned, I don't know about. Like I've started going to conferences earlier this year, like more heavily, maybe once every couple months I go to a conference. But a lot of it is what I stumble upon, like ClickFunnels,
Yeah, sure.
Live,
Yeah, they're great.
whatever
Awesome,
I meet,
awesome.
whatever I know. And that's why I like to talk to you about like, hey, like what is in your what is it, realm, or what's visible to you,
Sure.
what you love. And SaaStr, what is the second one?
MicroComp. So it's for more bootstrap businesses, and that one has like a very interesting following. Lots of smart folks. I actually haven't been to that one, but my friends Hitten and other folks like recommend it. I'm a big fan of SaaStock out of Ireland. Like that one's a fantastic conference. Great organizers are great folks. And like I said, Jason Lemkin with SaaStr is like awesome. He's a friend too. So like just great conferences, and you just meet a lot of really great people. They're all at different scales. So like Jason's is more of like, sort of like the VC funding model tends to be sort of like a lot of big SaaS names, and he's an incredible interviewer.
Jason Lemkin, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's awesome.
Oh, cool. Is it oh, let me say hi to those who are watching. Hey Lindsay, hey Khalil, hey Mike. Mike says need to solve bigger problems to get more subscribers. Cool. Hey Sonja, hey Bob. Thanks for joining us. Smash that heart button if you're finding this interview valuable. I know that I am getting value from it. So smash the heart button and hashtag live if you're here live, and hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. My question for you is there a trend that you're seeing? Like how come people who go into the software world become VC, become venture capitalists, and they fund other things? Why don't they double down on, why don't they focus on one and blow that up, or just people do whatever they want to do? But like, do you see any trend in that? Because I see a lot of people, once they've exited certain companies, then now they're like an investor and they invest in other software companies.
Well, I think, if the difference, I think, is Silicon Valley, and I can only speak about sort of San Francisco Bay Area, is that, for a lot of folks, like, if you make a lot of money, like in Europe, you make a lot of money, you basically go buy a nice house, you go buy Chateau at St. Moritz and a nice car. I feel like that's in LA too, right? And I think you sort of do that here in the Bay Area, but for social cachet, you do angel investing. I think part of it's to stay in the game, but there's just social cachet to angel investing. So that's kind of what you do, or you join a VC fund. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but that's just kind of the culture. For all intents. Well, just like if you're a Hollywood star, right? A lot of times, like, what do? You start a production house, right? You become
Oh, yeah.
you become a director. It's
Yeah,
kind
you're
of the
like,
equivalent. It's kind of the equivalent here in the Bay Area. It's no different, right? Or, and you know, on Wall Street, where just like you make a lot of money, you know, you join the board of like, you know, the Met, like that's like or you join a very well-known, you know, sort of philanthropic organization, right? Like every culture has its own, yeah, culture. Just like every region has its own sort of like culture, right? And that's
yeah.
kind of what happens here. For better or for worse, it's just kind of the way it is. So I just feel like I just take it for granted, but that's kind of just what you're supposed to do. I guess once you sort of have money, and it's also partly to stay in the game too, you're
Mhm.
learning.
That's really cool to hear. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's why people do it. You say social cachet. That means like so that people know who you are, and then you kind of get into more.
Yeah, like I'm
More
still a
game.
player, right? I'm not like, especially in tech or like, you know, Hollywood or tech, of just like, how do you stay relevant, right? Like this is how you stay relevant.
Mm, that's really cool to know. You say you invest in over 400 startups now.
Yeah,
How?
last 6 years.
Oh, okay, last 6 years. What's your week like in terms of, are you like massively with your being a partner of like, do you just get pitched, I don't know, all
Yeah,
the time every week?
it's insane. I mean, it's fine. That's a job, right? Like, what an incredible privilege to be able to do that. So, um, yeah, I mean, that's what the job entails. But also a lot of it is just like actually working with a portfolio that you have already, and that's like 400 companies. Like it's 400 problems, 400 plus problems all the time. But that's kind of what I signed up for. So, what an incredible privilege. So, I signed up for it. There's nothing to complain about, and you're learning new stuff all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, what what are like huge like why are reasons why startups fail for you?
The biggest reason, because they don't manage their cost structure. So like, you know, like I said, they have no business, right? And they can't raise money. But I think the biggest part is just like, they don't talk to customers enough, right? They haven't figured out, like, I think it's one of one of somebody, you know, audience, just like fix big problems of just like, but I would say, yes, generally speaking, fixing big problems is really, really important. But I do think that there's a micro before macro, right? Like, are you fixing problems for in the beginning? Like, have you located and figured out the customer segment, and have you been able to figure out the problem that only you can solve for them, right? Like in a unique way. And I'm like, this is all like bunch of like VC platitudes, but it's like you have to go very narrow first. So in the beginning, and just instead of trying to solve a problem for everybody, you want to go and find a small niche or sub segment to sort of figure out who they are, so you can solve their problem better than anybody else, and then you kind of expand out beyond that. I think the biggest problem is a lot of people try to solve like too wide of a spectrum. They try to figure out a problem that's sort of like, everyone has this problem. I'm like, yes, but like for me, the biggest advice I can give founders is like, you want to find the most narrow niches possible in the beginning and solve their problem, because that's your wedge in the market. And then over time, to sort of expand that wedge, right? I've never seen a startup to come in and they go, I'm going to solve this for like everybody. And I'm like, they just never survive, because you don't have any focus, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So go super narrow. And a lot of software that if you hear about them and they're solving everyone's problem, they're like 0.000, 1% of all existing software. It's really, really rare that
You
you
don't
hear
stand
about
out,
them.
right? Like
Yeah,
I think Napoleon said this. It's just like, he who defends everything defends nothing.
yeah,
And so like, how do you stand out? Who's the customer trying to solve? So this is something I spend a lot of time with my like, I literally just got out of a meeting with one of my startups. So so I'm like, okay, how's it going? How's this week been? And they're like, oh, like we're talking to like these different people. And I'm just like, what's a universal thing that all these folks have? Like there's nothing, right? So you're doing stuff with like the medical sort of like, sort of like the medical group and the healthcare area. And you're now doing stuff with like outsourcing companies, and you're doing stuff with this. Like, I don't understand. Like you're solving, these are all very distinct different groups, and there's nothing universal. Like focus, right? Like focus, because like you can't get resonance with anybody. and it's confusing, right? Like I think in the beginning, a lot of it's about simplification, just like simplify in the beginning, solve that problem. Then once you knock that out, go to the next one. But if you're trying to do like, so this is an example of like, I'm a bigger fan of like A/B testing versus multivariate testing, right? Like multivariate testing is like, it's very complicated. There's so many different factors. There's all these different groups. A/B testing is like very clean and clear. And so your job is to simplify as much as possible and reduce complexity.
Awesome.
And it sounds like very easy, right? Like it sounds super, super easy. You're like, yeah, of course, like this is very basic, but you don't, right? Like how many founders and how many entrepreneurs you talk with towards like, they're working on like 20 different things. And you're like, sometimes you have to do that, but it's just like, okay, what's your priority, right?
Yeah, well, I'm very shocked when someone comes into like my program and they've already have software for a while. And I'm like, how long have you been working on this? Oh, I've been building this and I've hired a developer and it has been a year. I'm like, do you even launch or have anything? And have you sold one copy? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what? Have you talked to your customers? No.
Yeah.
And you spent all this time and money.
That's, I mean, but here's the thing, that's super common, right? Like I've seen situations where like they've done it for like 2 years and you're like, what are you doing?
I don't know. Yeah, anyways, yeah.
But you know, I actually understand why that happens, right? Like number one, I think it happens because it's like, it's partly like fear. We all have fear. We all have different fears, every single one of us. And it's just like, I don't want people to, like, I don't want to launch, honestly. Like, I don't want to launch because I don't want people to tell me my baby's ugly.
And that fear is stronger than a lot of us. Like, I think, like, I take for granted that I can launch without inhibition, without feeling all these emotional things that's attached to it. And I take that for granted. And when I hear stories that, oh, it takes years and all that stuff, then I'm like, oh, wow. I feel kind of grateful that I broke through a lot of these mental barriers. And I think that's what, as someone teaching others, like that's really important to tell them, hey, the real world looks like this, you know, you start this way and you need to just go for like a certain niche and solve their problem. And this is the myths and these are the fears that will hold you back, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is just sometimes the fantasy world is so much easier. And I face all these things too, right? Like we all face these things. And what I would say, just, you know, I think a lot about that, you know, Mike Tyson's quote, right? Like everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And so I think as an entrepreneur, you have to actually be willing to go and get punched in the face a lot, because you go out there and like, I think everyone has this problem, you launch it and everyone's like, this sucks, right? And you're like, oh, it hurts. But then you're like, okay, but that's helpful. Like, I think the market always tells you the truth, right? Like, it's not always nice, like what the market tells you, just like, oh yeah, your baby's ugly. Wait a minute, I spent like half a year, like my blood, sweat and tears, or like authors, right? Or movie directors who like create these movies and they go out and they just get panned by everybody. It's hard, right? And so I understand it. You know, like I think, whether you're an artist, whether you're a film producer, whether you're an entrepreneur, it's a creative activity. Whether you're an author, a book author, whatever it is, right? Like you are a creative, this is a creative act. And not everybody is going to appreciate like what you are doing. But you know, I think that's okay. It's the same thing for me, where I'm just like not, you know, like I invest, right? So let's say out of the 400 and plus companies I'm invested in, like, they, you know, I know for a fact, like, you know, 10% of them will like love me no matter what I do, right? But I also have come to the realization, I didn't get this, but I get it now. Like 10% of the founders hate my guts. Like, you know, like, and that's just like, and this is the same thing whether your subscribers or customers, just like 10% of your customers will love you no matter what you do. 10% of your customers will like hate you no matter what you do. And it's the 80% in between that you sort of have to win over, right? So if you can do that, that's actually incredibly valuable. And I've just come to a realization that, you know what, like there is just always going to be a subset of people that will hate you. And you just have to sort of like get used to it. And you hope it's only 10%, right? You hope it's not 90% or 50%. Then you're in big trouble. Then you have no business, right? And then you're probably a horrible human being. But just like, I don't know. I hope 50% of my startups don't hate me. I know it's 10% at least, maybe 10, 15%. But my view is as long as I have like 80, 85% of them, that means I'm probably doing a pretty decent job.
Yeah, I think so. Cool. Do you know, so I know that we have a hard stop in 9 minutes, so I'm going to ask you super quick questions. For team building, what do you see that works in terms of like hiring and having more team members? Is it like just go ahead and just go and do it and try it out? Or is it more like calculated, or like what have you seen that is a successful behavior in companies growing their team members?
So my take is that I actually think that it's better that you try to be as scrappy as possible for as long as possible. I think that it's a matter of like organic growth. So I think the relationships have to be somewhat organic, but if you do have to hire a lot, like I think that you should do them as like, hire fast, sort of like, sorry, it's just like hire slow, fire fast is a philosophy that I sort of ascribe to. I think hire people as contractors first, just to sort of like work together, contractors and consultants first, to sort of see how you work well together. And if it works well together, then maybe it becomes sort of a longer term relationship. But it's like, date before you get married, right? And I feel like too many times people think like you just get married right away. And like, that's just never worked out. Like, and so I'm a big believer of hire slow, fire fast. But most people tend to be like hire fast, fire slow, and that's just death, right? And I actually think we're entering a world now where you're going to see a lot of startups just be like really small. Like, I don't know this idea of like growth and being big, like, oh, you're only a real company of about 100 people working for you. I'm like, that's just stupid. Like, I think that's an industrial age mentality. And I think if you look at examples of Buffer or like, Basecamp, like I think that's a counter. And so this is weird coming from VC. Like I don't think most startups these days should be raising VC money. I don't think most startups these days should be chasing crazy growth, right? Like not every startup is going to become a $1 billion company, nor should it be. I somewhere along the lines we just like got caught up around growth, and I'm just like growth for the sake of growth. And that's something that to be honest kind of disgusts me in Silicon Valley right now.
Growth for the sake of growth. Yeah, well, my world is more for like the niche people, the no need to get venture capitalist funding.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I think that even a lot of the venture capital funded companies, I think they could have done better bootstrapping a little bit longer before they went and raised.
Cool. If you were to start over again, and let's say that and this is a question I asked, it's a favorite question of mine. If you were to start completely over again, and you lost everything, what would your journey be now, like in this time, if you were to start over?
I think it's an amazing time right now to sort of like looking back, right? Like I would do something in the startup space. I'd do something in the software space for sure, probably a niche startup. And honestly, I would do it as, I hate that term, like digital nomad, such a douchebag term, right? Like I love the concept, but I hate the term because it's so abused now by a lot of trustafarians and stuff, right? But I think the concept actually makes sense, right? The fact that you can serve customers from all over the world and you can do it from anywhere, preferably from low cost, or maybe it's Mexico City, maybe it's Lisbon, maybe it's like Thailand, I don't know, like what, or Bali. But you can build from anywhere now, right? Like there's so many tools now, like you're seeing the low code movement. And if you can, like for me, the first thing I learned, sales, online marketing, copywriting. I wouldn't learn coding. I think you can hire that. And there's a lot of low code and no code tools. And you can build a drop shipping business. You can be an Instagram influencer. I know that's a good thing. But anyways, like there's just so many things you can do now, right? Like, do like FBA, like, furnished by Amazon, do eBay, like eBay is still a great channel, like, or Etsy, do copywriting, do blogging, do a newsletter business. Like I'm going to work on a newsletter business now, right? Like just like there's so many things that you can do now to make money that doesn't require to have a job. And that to me is just like incredible, right? Like, and so if you learn online marketing, you learn the basics of like copywriting, there's so many tools out there that allow you to build amazing sort of like to really serve like different niches and customers out there. And you can do it from anywhere in the world. That's amazing. And that's a very privileged thing to say, but like, what an amazing time.
I have a last question for you. Well, from my audience, they said, Mike says, Marvin, do you only invest in tech startups? What's your average investment?
Yeah, so yeah. I mean, we invest in mainly software companies, right? And our average investment is about $150,000.
Okay.
So we invest in the pre-seed and seed stage, so very, very early.
Oh. So if you were to go from, let's say you start over and you have your niche software, at what point do you switch over to, not switch over, but become like a VC? Or are you going like, or are you going to work to try to get funding from your niche software?
No, I wouldn't.
I want to know your.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually. I would focus on actually building a good sustainable business. And like I said, this term lifestyle business is used derogatorily, and I don't know why. I'm like, everybody should have a lifestyle business, right? Like if you can have like 3 or 4 of these like niche software businesses, like churning out like, $5,000 a month, like that's an incredible living, right? Like I have a friend of mine, he's making like $80,000 a month with like a staff of 3 people doing like FBA, like furnished by Amazon. I mean, that's an amazing lifestyle, right? Like, I'm just like, there's nothing wrong. He works like maybe literally, I don't even think he even works like 4 hours a week, right? Like, I mean, that's a dream. I have another good, I have a lot of friends who like are in those positions, and they will never raise VC money. VCs won't look at their businesses, but like, who cares?
Right? Who cares?
Who cares? Right? Like, I'm like, this is like, that's an incredible lifestyle, and they're solving real problems for real customers. Like, that's amazing, right? And you actually get to leverage your time better, and you get to optimize your lifestyle, and, and really protect what I think is like the most powerful, in my opinion, the most important and powerful commodity that all of us have, that is like the most valuable and non-renewable commodity, which is your time. You don't get that back.
Yeah, and hearing that coming from you makes me really like take that into heart. It just makes me feel like sometimes we're conflicted between trying to build something big and trying to just be kind of smaller and just chill out.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I think that the biggest thing that people can do is learn to think for yourselves and learn to think critically, and not pay attention to what other people are saying, what your family is saying, and also not pay attention to what the media is saying. They're always wrong. The consensus is wrong.
Mm. All right, we have 1 minute left. So it's like you're kind of different than a lot of people I interview, because they're trying to do stuff and get somewhere. So I asked, what is next?
I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to do stuff. I'm trying to get somewhere.
All right, what is next for Marvin? What is next for Marvin Liao? Like what's next for you? And where can they go to find you?
I'm on Twitter, is easy, at Marvin Liao, or LinkedIn. And the reality is that I'm exploring sort of more this concept of portfolio entrepreneurship, of just like, how do I build out like all these sort of like different, like, I think that we're entering a new entrepreneurial age, right? And I've talked a lot about sort of the future of work, and sort of this idea of just like, everybody needs to have a lifestyle business, even have a job, even if you're independently wealthy, even if you working at a corporate job, like you should have like side hustles and these sort of like these other sort of business things, because like as a portfolio entrepreneur, it's actually really, really important. Like I talk about focus. So obviously you have to get one up and running, then you go and build the next one. You don't try to do like 5 things at the same time, but the whole goal is to try to build these sort of like different sort of like revenue sources and different sort of like income streams. It diversifies you, right? So this idea of becoming, Nassim Taleb's idea of like anti-fragile, like the reality is actually we're entering a world now that's going to be like very, very turbulent. And so everybody needs to find a way to become much more anti-fragile.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Anti-fragile. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in here. I love your just your honesty and how you talk. It's like I'm talking to a friend, because you're just like telling me.
We are friends. We are friends.
Yes, we are friends now.
We are friends.
I'll see you at SaaS Doc and random conferences.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to my audience, talking to me today. And yeah, guys, go follow him on Twitter, Marvin at Marvin Liao, and have a wonderful day. I know you have a meeting to jump
Yes.
to, so
Thank you so much for your time.
all right, bye.
Bye.
Oh yeah, if you like that video, then you will love all the resources that I have over at kimcdang.com. That is KIMCDANG.com. There you will find all my courses, my extensions, all the offers that I have, as well as a lot of free resources if you are just getting started.